Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gord Dobrowolski from Prince Albert, and it is indeed my pleasure to say a few remarks about my political buddy, Brenda. It's only proper that my remarks be said with a mural of John Diefenbaker in the background, because so many of our political conversations were about Mr. Diefenbaker, he being from Prince Albert and myself as well being from Prince Albert. So with that, I have to say, I miss Brenda and will continue to miss Brenda. There's no one that laughed harder or hugged longer than Brenda. I was one of the lucky recipients of many of Brenda's patented hugs. One of our last hugs lasted a really long time, and I whispered in her ear that if we hugged much longer, that people in the room would probably start to talk. I can't tell you what she whispered back to me, but suffice it to say that we continued to hug until we felt like quitting. Lucky me, for sure. Brenda was the consummate political strategist. Our scheduled half-hour coffees would go for an hour. Our scheduled one-hour lunches would go for 2 hours. And if we couldn't get together, we would talk by phone. And those phone conversations simply lasted forever. But regardless of the type of meeting we had, I would always come away politically smarter and very well informed. Her laughter, as you all know, was legendary. It really came from the heart. It came from the gut. A totally off-the-wall type of humor. We laughed a lot, mostly about political things, where she would say, "What would happen if?" and away she'd go. Brenda had never forgiven me for not traveling with her during the 1986 campaign, where we were doing advance work for Premier Devine. But during that campaign, we would meet up periodically and chat, and what great times we had then. And 30 plus years later, we would still talk about that campaign and all the other campaigns that we worked in like they happened yesterday. Brenda would always call when she'd come to Regina, and we'd always get together, even if it was briefly. It was always a reunion, and we had so much fun just sitting back and talking. I remember very well the night Donald Trump was elected president in November of 16. We sat back at the Hotel Saskatchewan and watched the results come in, Brenda commenting on every political nuance that the US media would make. We both took, especially Brenda though, great joy in watching CNN go crazy over Trump being elected. I have so many fond political memories of my political buddy, Brenda. As we say in Ukrainian, Vichnaya pamyat, Brenda, meaning forever remembered.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to share a few memories of our dear friend and colleague, Brenda Barutis. I was hoping to be joining all of you today in person. However, I'm in Thunder Bay, attending my niece's wedding and doing my uncle's duty in the celebration. My name is Donnie Chenoweth, and I'm a friend and former colleague of B Squared. Brenda and I first met each other in the mid-1980s in the wonderful workplace called the Saskatchewan Legislature in Regina. In the Grant Devine administration, Brenda was toiling away with Minister Graham Taylor, and I was with Minister Bob Andrew. At the time, I didn't know Brenda was from political royalty in the Progressive Conservative Party, being her father's staff was in the Canadian Senate, but I'll come back to that later. Brenda, Karina Kalba, unbeknownst to us later to become a Barutis, Mark Wiegers and I were a cabal waiting to launch. Politics was our passion, but having fun was even more of a hunger, and we lived those 3 or 4 years in full throttle mode. Brenda led our little team in so many ways. Since Regina was her town, compared to the three of us being from small town Saskatchewan, she had us living large, as they say in the Queen City. We played co-ed volleyball in the winters, co-ed slow pitch in the summers, and of course attended our favorite Rough Riders games to take in a few pilsners in the crazy sections of the old stadium. Brenda had us skiing in Whitefish, Montana, along with tours in Lake Louise and Sunshine, and even got us out camping weekends in our wonderful provincial parks. Brenda was also great for getting us out onto the frozen Wascana Lake during the dark, cold, starry nights to skate the loops until our hands and feet were frozen. And then we proceeded to find a nightcap somewhere in the city, which leads me to the one story I chuckle every time I think of Brenda. We ended up at the Keg in Regina, the South Keg, one evening which was one of the political haunts for all of us young conservatives. And needless to say, once we shut that drinking establishment down, we were thinking, where else could we go for one more? Just one more. Well, Brenda, in her infinite wisdom, kindly suggested her parents were away down south and staff's liquor cabinet needed to be exercised. So off we trundled to the Barudi's family home. Upon our arrival, Brenda opens the front door and of course the home security system goes off. Starts to beep, giving her 15 seconds to punch in the code. But by then, with blurry eyes and less than nimble fingers, coming in from the cold, the security alarms, aka the sirens, started to sound. Brenda was then trying to call the security company to let them know it was just her at 3 o'clock in the morning and not to worry. Meanwhile, being such woodsmen, Mark Wiegers and I were trying to start the fireplace and get some heat in the home as the furnaces had been down for a period of time. Well, we opened up the flue, stuffed it full of newspapers and firewood, and lit the match. Without warming up the chimney, nor preparing for the downdraft with minus 30-degree temperatures coming down the chute. So within 30 seconds, the house was completely filled with smoke. Smoke detectors going off, and of course the sirens going off again with the security monitoring system. Fire trucks dispatched, and the four of us sitting there trying to explain to the firemen and the Regina Police Force who we were, what we were doing, and just trying to figure out how friggin' intoxicated we were and how stupid we are. I don't remember getting into the liquor cabinet that night, but the story doesn't end there. About 2 years later, I was working in Ottawa for the Mulroney government for Honourable Bill McKnight. McKnight was famous for his get-togethers on Thursday nights in his Parliament Hill office before the MPs finished up on Friday morning after question period and going back to their ridings. So one of my earlier attendances of the said get-togethers, in comes two gentlemen from the Senate to join the fun. One, a Senator Nate Nergitz from Manitoba, and secondly, staff Barudi's from Saskatchewan. All dolled up in their tuxedos for some formal event they had to go to that evening, but hoping for a quick cocktail and get to say hi to everybody in McKnight's office. I get introduced to both senators, and lo and behold, it doesn't take staff 5 seconds with a twinkle in his eye stating, "You are the reprobate that almost burnt my house down." I was thinking of throwing our ringleader Brenda under her dad's proverbial bus, but took the hit that evening with many memories attached to the fun that we all had in our Regina days. Brenda, as we all know, is intelligent, passionate, quick with the wit, comebacks on any person or point she wanted to engage with. She was athletic, loved people, or most of them, and lived life to the fullest every day of her shortened life. Brenda and I remained friends even though our lives took different directions for a few years, and always loved to laugh and joke about the many memories we created together in our political days. Over the past couple of years, Brenda was instrumental in getting our friend and former colleague, the now retired Premier Brad Wall, together here in Calgary when Brad was in town. Drinks, dinner, political discussions, lots of laughter was always in order. The true form of Brenda Barudi's. During her cancer treatments, we got together when we could. She leaned on my big burly body and my cancer experiences to help her cope as best as possible. It never made it easy, but she fought as best she could in the battle that took her away from us way too early. Brenda was an inspiration to many of us, a great friend to all of us. We miss her dearly. And over the last few months, I know we've all shed a few tears knowing we lost a great one. May she rest in peace with her political spirit, joining her in the heavens above. Please join me with our toast to our friend, B squared.
get into my some words of tribute, it should not be lost on any of us that there are here gathered with us a couple of former premiers and the current premier of Saskatchewan. And we should note well and mark well that Brenda played a very significant role in creating the opportunity for all of those governments to serve. And it should also be noted, lest there be any doubt, that beyond her advocacy, beyond her volunteering, beyond her campaign and political abilities, through her vocation, through her avocation, through her business, Brenda improved the lives of citizens of both the provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta, and probably Manitoba. We have better policy today in all three of those jurisdictions and better programs because of her efforts. It went beyond just her political abilities, her campaigning abilities. It was very much about her passion for where she lived in policy areas, especially in healthcare, for which she felt very strongly. Monica, and I could also hear her now, apropos of what Brent said. She would seem to be saying something to me like, "Keep it short, Your Excellency." And she knew that her increasingly ostentatious and ridiculous honorifics that she would sign to me bugged me. The moment that I let her know that they bugged me, they got even more ridiculous and more ostentatious. "Your we're unworthy of you-ness, you're upon our pedestalness," it's even hard to say these, to repeat these things, "we're all on the list." And I know my increasing trend towards dressing Western kind of bugged her too. We would get together in Calgary in these last number of years when I would be there on business every couple of weeks, and I'd go through a day of meetings and arrange to meet Brenda for a bite or just a bit of a get-together. And she would make it known that she didn't really necessarily think my Western wear was perhaps appropriate for the business that I was doing. She'd ask questions when we met, like, "Did you have client meetings today? And did they have a mechanical bull set up?" She especially thought the belt buckle was unnecessary. And when she told me that, I made sure to wear any number of them. She would look at it and say, "Somewhere in Brett Wilson's neighborhood, there's a BMW missing a hubcap." B Squared was the master of passive aggression. Or maybe for her it was more aggressive passion. Because hers always came from a place of love. Sharpened by her rapier-like wit, but always from a place of love. She used that aggressive passion to tell me the truth, especially when I needed, perhaps more than other times, to hear the truth. And so I want to honor that today. This great trait she had, this great truth about Brenda. When I first met her, she was Brenda Barutz, because technically I only had met her nameplate on the desk at the Employment Development Agency where I was a summer student and she was on leave. She had been working at that agency for some time and took a summer leave, and I was lucky enough to get a summer job and met